Juergen, you rose to the top of the company that was where you worked for most of your life at Siemens. Did you set out at the beginning of your career to be the top of the tree?
Absolutely not. If anybody would have suggested to me, either at school, university, or even in my first 10 years within Siemens, that I might be the chief executive of such a fabulous organization in the UK, I would have said, you're dreaming, and certainly I would have been dreaming. So no.
So, what did others see in you? What did you see in yourself eventually that suggested you had the qualities to make a great leader, which objectively, I don't want to embarrass you, objectively, people say you are?
Well, I think there's probably two or even three things that come together to make such things possible. I think one is sometimes just timing, and where you are, and certainly sort of towards the let's say the last 10 years of my 30 plus year career with Siemens. I think the world was moving into a direction of my style of leadership. The world before had been in a, let's call it, a more authoritarian, some sort of, call it, alpha male type of leadership that was prevalent within Siemens and did achieve results. And it was recognized that, we needed a more inclusive, a more diverse, call it a more sensing, maybe call it a more leading from behind type of style of leadership, and I suited that. And then the other thing is, I just developed a real passion, both for my company in terms of its purpose and the amazing things that were possible, and I wanted more of that to be possible. And at the same time, I had a passion and a fascination with why at one end the UK was so damn good at engineering, innovation, and manufacturing, yet as a country at large, it was relatively unappreciated and unrecognized in terms of the contribution it made to the economy and society. And I just built a passion to want to influence that.
You said that the time was right for a more inclusive, a more generous style of leadership. That was before 2020. And in fact, for a number of years, inflation had been down, interest rates were very low, supply chains were very extended, but they worked. And leadership, dare I say it, is much easier when times are good. It's when the going gets really rough that, as we are now, with things topsy turvy, all kinds of variables being thrown at leaders of manufacturing companies today. What would you counsel them about the qualities they need as they're watching all these brickbats being thrown at them by life?
Well, believe me, that I had some rough and tumble and tough times in Siemens too. You don't become a leader unless you're able to build some resilience and experience some of those tough times. I remember one of mine at having to close a factory in Birmingham. Where those sorts of jobs were much appreciated, and so you have to experience the tough times. Now, look, I'll be honest with you. I hadn't experienced anything quite like the manufacturing and indeed the whole business community has been through over the last 5 years. I mean, and it's just been one thing after the next, hasn't it? We don't need to list them all, but it sort of seemed to start with Brexit, hit COVID, energy crisis, no staff availability. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Now, look, I think in those tough times, there are a few leadership skills you can apply. And the sort of two that I would particularly point to is, in my view, it was always when things got really tough, when things were going fast, when things were so difficult, I always felt it was time for leaders to slow down. So, in fast, difficult times, slow down, think, be cautious. Of course, you sometimes are just caught and you have to make a fast decision. But generally, an environment of we can manage this, we can get through this, have some optimism that in the end we will be fine. We will find a way through these difficult times. So I think that would be one thing. And the other thing I think is to provide a safer environment for people as you possibly can. Now, look, that might not always be possible, um, but to say, look, we're going to do the right things in this company. We're going to be responsible, and I think, for example, of the last few years, I think the national conversation has got very difficult on this so-called woke agenda. I think people of my community, the LGBT community, have felt under attack. I think particularly the trans community have. It's been horrible. So therefore, in your company, to say to people, in this company, we don't have those type of divisive debates. This is inclusive. You're safe. Everybody is welcome. And I think people really value that when the going gets tough.
You made a very, very deliberate choice, and it was very public. You were present at Pride parades and so on, and it was very heartwarming to see how Siemens really blossomed and flourished under that. Did you face any resistance in that, or were you pushing at an open door?
Well, I would say from the large part of the employee base in Siemens, it was embraced with open arms. And thank you for the feedback, Nick, which sort of I think gives some evidence to the fact that externally it was noticed. And indeed, one of our key objectives was to make us more open and attractive to a broader skill set from the UK skills market. We were actually largely excluding ourselves from, dare I say, lots of women who might want to work for our company, people from the LGBT community, people with disabilities, would probably not have thought about applying to Siemens. And I hope today the legacy I left means many more people do. Did I meet any resistance? Of course. There was people within Siemens, usually in the middle management layer, that said things like, why are we supporting Pride? I mean, it's just not our priority, is it? We need to fix these problems and make sure we're making our EBITDA this month. Of course, I hit that sort of resistance, but that's where it takes leadership. It takes time. You bring people on board, and ultimately, I think most people saw that long term, this was the right thing to do, both societally but also for ultimately a better and more inclusive workforce, better decisions, faster innovation, and better business outcomes.
So, as a strategy, it wasn't just a heart strategy; it was a head strategy. It worked.
Absolutely. And I think that's always important. I think people, when you're, doing things of social responsibility or, of course, if it's about the environment, I think they work best if there is a social component, but at the same time, if there absolutely is a business imperative. And I think on all of this agenda, whether it's societal purpose, whether it's being inclusive, whether it's being more environmentally friendly in what you do, in the end, it all has an absolute business purpose, and that's important.
There's a noticeable movement among some business observers and some of the other voices on the right of the political spectrum are beginning to question in these tough times the value of ESG policies. They say they're actually harming business. We should scale them back, get back to what you said, the short term EBITDA focused, laser like war on woke, some of them call it. Does that concern you? Do you think we're watching, as I say, in these difficult times, a kind of pushback against some of the policies that you instituted at Siemens?
Well, I sort of see it as the last chance fight back of the alpha dominant, not very inclusive, largely, not wholly male. And it does worry me because a lot of the messaging they use isn't truthful, isn't grounded in reality in terms of the challenges that we're facing, and indeed doesn't recognise the huge progress we've made on ESG as a whole agenda, and indeed that most companies embrace it for the good of their own companies and also for society. Of course, there are a few that greenwash it and don't take it as seriously as they should, but I'd say 80% are in the right place on it. And let me tell you, the people who are driving this anti ESG, anti woke movement, they're going to be on the wrong side of history, because this next generation want to embrace ESG. They want to work for organizations that are making the environment better, that are being more inclusive. And guess what? Those will be the leaders of the future. So therefore, it's obvious that this agenda is going to be the agenda. So on the whole scale of things, it worries me short term. It will be a blip, and these people will go down in history as having been on the wrong side of it.
Final question. I'm thinking of all the young people, next generation coming through, talking about leadership, and the fact that you yourself didn't even think for 1 second when you were much younger about being, the leader. Is leadership innate, or is it something you learn? Did you learn some of the skills, or was it because you were in touch with, yourself, that you really began to get that passion for it?
Well, if you would have had this conversation with me 20 years ago, I think it would have sounded very different. And I've learned so much in 20 years, particularly about responsible and inclusive leadership. So I would say 90% of what we've talked about today has been learned, built on experience. So absolutely. And very important is leadership styles, what you apply, it changes all the time. So leadership has to be learned, because you have to change with the times and you have to stay relevant and apply what is working today, and very importantly, what the future holds.
Juergen Maier, thank you so much.
Thank you.